Hello, if you want to watch exclusive lemon content on What If Naruto, then go to my Boosty. The first link in the description here contains such hot stories for adults, such as What If Naruto was a daddy for Sarada, or Kushina and Mikoto vulgar Naruto mommies. Follow the link and enjoy. I'm waiting for you.
He felt the ground under his feet begin to shake. The tremors intensified until fissures formed in the earth. In the distance, he felt an explosion of evil and vile chakra. Being a Hinshiriki, Naruto easily identified the feeling of the demonic chakra. "I guess you can feel the brat," a voice was heard inside Naruto's head. "I doubt there is anyone in the elementary countries who can't." "Kyuubi, what the hell is going on here?" Naruto asked. The Kyuubi replied with a single word to Katsuki. "What?" "What you are feeling, Mikoto, is the chakra of all the Viju, excluding me, being released at the same time." The Kyuubi replied in a somber tone. "Shit, well, I have to go back to Konoha and see what Bachan wants to do." "It doesn't matter, child," the Kyuubi said, interrupting his container, "as the world will be destroyed." "What the hell are you talking about, Kyuubi?" Naruto screamed inside his head. As if in response to Naruto's question, the earthquakes became even more violent than they had been minutes earlier. Forests were destroyed, villages burned, and mountains collapsed. Somehow, the Vihulu that Akatsuki captured were released. The demonic chakra is much more powerful than that of your pitiful human variety, as you well know. Your world cannot support such an amount of demonic chakra released in one go. And therefore, this world has begun to crumble. Naruto fell to his knees upon hearing this. The information hit him with more force than any punch of Tsunade. They were all going to die, including himself. It didn't even occur to him to check if the Kyuubi had lied. Somehow, deep down, I knew that the great fox demon was telling the truth. Iruka-sensei, their aim, and Kairakuages. San, Kakashi-sensei, Yamato-sensei, Kurenai-sensei, Gei-sensei, La, Kiba, Shino, Chuji, Neji, Hino, Shikamaru. Tenten, Anko-san, Tamari, Gaara, Enabi, Sai, Bachan, Hirosanin, Sakura-chan and Greek, and Mata-chan. While thinking about his girlfriend, he felt his heart break into at the thought of her death. They saw that when you are about to die, you see your life pass before your eyes. Well, Naruto remembered the events that led to him and Mata getting together. A little over a year ago, Team 7 had their final reunion with their long-lost companion. And it was an encounter that Yuki Izusuke did not survive. A small group of Konoha ninjas had launched an assault against a group of the snake Sannin Orochimaru. While Jiraiya, Tsunade, Kakashi, and Yamato took care of Orochimaru and Kabuto, Naruto and Sakura stayed with Sasuke. He was enraged when Naruto told him that he had already killed Itachi and that Orochimaru had hidden it from him. Sasuke responded by stabbing the one person who loved him more than his life, Aruno Sakura, with his grass cutter Kusanagi. Fortunately, the wound was not fatal and Sai was able to heal it. However, the fact that Sasuke had tried to kill Sakura put Naruto on edge, and he finally jumped in with all his might and threw their friendship overboard. And in the end, Futon Rasengan Wind Element Spiral Sphere is infinitely more powerful than Chidori Thousand Birds. That was how Naruto finished what Hitachi had started. The Uchiha clan was annihilated forever. After that, Sakura stopped being a shinobi and fell into a deep depression. He isolated himself from everyone for 3 months. Naruto assumed that Sakura hated him for killing Sasuke and started to get depressed himself. But after Sasuke's death, Hinata was there for him. Within a few weeks, Naruto accepted what had happened and was back to his usual self. And Mata and Naruto continued to spend a lot of time together, and a month later, Naruto fulfilled one of his biggest wishes: to receive his first kiss from Naruto. And, except for the protests of the elders, and Yuga with the Ketsunade was quickly taken care of. Everything had gone from strength to strength since then. Tears began to form in Naruto's eyes, but the sadness quickly gave way to an unbridled rage towards those responsible for the founding of Akatsuki Konin, Pain, and Yukiya Madara. But he had other things to do at that moment, so he quickly pushed those thoughts out of his head. Then he asked the Kyubula what was probably the most important question of his life. "Hey Kyuubi, is there anything we can do to fix this?" The Kyuubi was silent for a moment, and Naruto waited for his response instead of screaming and squealing, as he was known to do. "Well, brat, there's something we could try. But it's incredibly dangerous and will probably cost us both our lives." As if sensing what Naruto was about to ask, the Kyuubi answered before Naruto could even ask the question. "Time travel, back a fox. Everyone knows that time travel is impossible," Naruto angrily stated. "It's impossible for you humans, and yet that hasn't stopped you from trying for generations," the Kyuubi said dismissively. "However, there is a demonic technique that allows you to travel through time. The problem, however, is that they are not a demon, and there is not enough time to prepare the technique properly." "So, what does that mean?" "Well, even if you're just a simple human, getting to know you wouldn't be a problem. However, the technique involves a complicated set of stamps drawn on the ground in concentric circles that we don't have time to do properly. Basically, since the stamps will be incomplete, we'll probably both die," the Kyuubi said earnestly. "Well, you know me, Kyuubi," Naruto said to his tenant. "I've been defying the odds my whole life. Let's do it." Inside his cage, the Kyuubi began to carve a series of seals with his claws. But time was pressing, and many stamped circles were poorly aligned, while others were incomplete. "I hope this works out because I have no intentions of going to the afterlife with this gaki." In a matter of minutes, the Kyuubi had drawn all the stamps he thought he had time for. Naruto notices that the sky has turned red, blood, and that the intensity of earthquakes continues to increase. He also noticed a faint orange glow coming from Konoha. "Okay, brat, we're ready. First, I will pour my chakra into the seals to activate them. Then, I will force the exit of all my chakra possible through the seal. To, hopefully, create a break in time. I hope it works, and we don't end up dead." "Well, then let's start with the show," Naruto said. "One thing before we start, as the stamps are incomplete, I have no idea where we will end up in the past if this works. Ah, and this will hurt more than anything else you've ever experienced." Naruto was about to respond to the Kyuubi when, suddenly, he felt that it released more chakra than ever. And, true to his word, Naruto felt a pain more intense than he could have ever imagined. He felt as if his whole body was on fire from the inside out. The demonic chakra seemed to sprout from Naruto and burst towards the sky. Naruto was in so much pain that he just wished it would all end. Suddenly, he noticed something strange in front of him. It felt like the space in front of me was starting to tear apart. Slowly, the tear began to widen more and more, until it reached about 3 times the height of Naruto. Inside, there was a swirling mass of multicolored energy. "Wait a few more seconds, boy." Almost finished, suddenly, the energy expanded outward and completely enveloped Naruto. He felt himself being pushed forward into the tear, and then everything went blank. Within Naruto's mindscape, the unconscious Kazama Uzumaki Naruto lay face down in front of the Kirumi's cage. Slowly, he began to move and sit up until he was sitting up. "Now that you're awake, brat, welcome to the past," the Kirumi said. "What do you mean it worked? Aren't we dead?" Naruto asked the Kyuubi enthusiastically. "No, brat, we are not dead," replied the Kyuubi while laughing covertly. "However, there are some complications first. We are much further back than we should be, decades before you were born. I'm not sure exactly how far, but luckily we're only a mile or 2 from Konoha, so it won't be too hard to find out." After spending 17 years with the Kyuubi, Naruto could claim that he knew the fox quite well. Years of deceit and conspiracies to gain freedom had given him a unique insight into the devil. So he knew there was something the Kyuubi wasn't telling him. "Well, at least I'm alive. I'll take care of the rest when I get to Konoha. So, how about you tell me what you're trying to hide from me?" The Kyuubi showed its fangs in what could be considered a malicious smile. In fact, over the years, it became increasingly difficult for him to hide things from his container. "You're not as dumb as you look anymore, brat. It seems that, somehow, the process of time travel has separated us. I've finally gotten rid of you." A look of pure terror came over Naruto as he began to consider the implications of what this might mean. Although they had gotten along better in recent years, Naruto knew that the Kyuubi would still devour him. And probably destroy Konoha if given the chance. Ah, the beautiful stench of fear. You don't know how long I've been waiting to see you afraid of me, brat. But lucky for you, I won't be staying to devour you. What the hell do you mean? Naruto asked. Since the first day I met you, it has been a day when I will break free from this prison and devour you, blah blah blah. In fact, I would normally seriously consider devouring you, but there's no need. I can feel how my soul gradually leaves your body and merges with mine. After the process is completed, it seems that I will return to the demon world. So I guess you and your village got lucky, the Kyuubi said simply. Understanding slowly took over Naruto's face. So you mean, yes, you won't have to worry about my visit the day you are born, because I will leave this world forever. Just don't ask me how a door opens to my world, or why they separate us. I couldn't even begin to explain it to you. I can't believe it. I'm going to be normal, no one will call me a demon, no cats. Suki will come for me. I'll be just Naruto, simple as that. As you know, over time, our chakras have been merging, and that's why the healing properties that I have granted you over the years will remain after my departure. And, as you know, thanks to this, you will live longer and get older. You will be slower than most humans. But I wanted to leave you one last parting gift, so to speak. Suddenly, the Kyuubi's claws shot out from between the bars, and one of them pierced Naruto through the seal. Suddenly, a spiral column of demonic chakra emerged from Naruto's body. Once again, Naruto felt as if he was on fire, but he noticed that the chakra slowly turned from red to a purple color, then began to turn blue and be absorbed by his body. Naruto lost consciousness again due to the pain. Gradually, the Kyuubi began to disappear from view. Well, brat, it's been quite interesting. Don't take this the wrong way, but I hope we won't meet again in our whole life, the Kyuubi said before he, along with the cage that once contained him, completely vanished. When Naruto regained consciousness, he found himself on a bed, staring at a white ceiling. Damn, I'd recognize Konoha's hospital no matter what time it is, Naruto thought as he growled slightly. Well, young man, I see you've finally woken up. A voice spoke that sounded vaguely familiar to Naruto. Familiar. Slowly, Naruto sat up on his bed and turned to the door of his room to see who had spoken to him. When he finally saw who it was, his eyes widened in surprise. Although he was much younger than in Naruto's time, he could recognize such a person anywhere. Oh Jizen, is that you? Naruto asked weakly. Standing in the doorway of Naruto's hospital room was indeed Sarutobi, but judging by what Naruto remembered from the history lessons, the Sarutobi in front of him was at his best. Naruto heard someone laughing behind Sarutobi before he spoke. Well, Saru, this guy's disrespect aside, he seems to recognize you. When Sarutobi stepped aside, Naruto's eyes opened even wider, if possible, as he saw a figure enter the room that Naruto had only seen pictures of. In front of him was the man who had helped his older brother to found with Ogakure no Sato, the village hidden among the leaves. Standing in front of Naruto was the Niddame Okage. Shit, that was the only thought going through Naruto's head as he looked directly at the young Sarutobi and the Niddame Okage. When the Kyuubi said that there was no telling how long it might take, that was definitely not what he had in mind. That thought led Naruto to notice that his mind was a little clearer than usual. Wait a minute. Where the hell is the Kyuubi? For someone so used to having another presence inside his head, the impossibility of contacting the Kyuubi alarmed him for a moment. Then he remembered that the Kyuubi had told him that, if the technique was successful, they would be separated forever. However, the Niddame's voice pulled Naruto out of his thoughts. Well, I'm glad to see you awake and active. Naruto couldn't help but hesitate briefly when Nigai asked him his name. Oh shit. What am I going to do? I can't use the name Uzumaki because Uzunoku, my whirlpool country, and my mother's family are still alive. But I can't call myself Namikaze Naruto because when Erosanin takes his team, people might look at him and think I'm my own father. So Naruto did what he always does in situations like this. He did what he does best. He acted on instinct and invented something. Naruto, Kazama Naruto, replied the blonde. Well, let me introduce myself. I am the Nidame Okage, the leader of Kanawagakure no Sato village hidden among the leaves, and he is my former student, Sarutobi. Now that you've woken up, Naruto, I hope you're well enough to tell us a few things about yourself. Naruto nodded, and the Nigai interpreted it to me as a sign to continue. You see, early this morning, there was a strange flash of light reported near the training ground. This light was followed by a massive chakra surge, and then Sarutobi found you where the chakra surge was reported. And he found you with this. The Nigai extended his hand to me and showed Naruto the necklace Tsunade had given him, as well as the remains of his estate. Naruto was lost. He had simply assumed that it would end at some point in his past, not decades before his father was born. I always assumed that I would have to explain some things to Ojizun. He would know I was lying, but he would still trust me. He was at a crossroads. He could tell the truth about what happened and be declared crazy, or he could lie. Difficult decision. I come from a small village near the borders of the country of fire. I came to Konoha hoping to become a shinobi, Naruto said, hoping the two men would just accept what he was telling them. Did you know that? Asked the Nidame smiling. Well, I guess you've already received training. However, you will still have to get tested. You'll be discharged today, and an aspiring shinobi will need some equipment. At this, Sarutobi threw Naruto a small bag that was full of money along with a scroll with an address. That scroll is the address of the hotel you're staying at for now. Use the money to buy some clothes and equipment, then meet me at Boot Camp 13 in 3 hours. As Naruto walked through the streets of Konoha, it became increasingly apparent that this was not his Konoha. No one looked at him as if it was a crime just to breathe. Some merchants even greeted him as he walked down the street. He was just a newcomer to the village. The biggest reminder that he was no longer in his time was when, out of habit, he went to Ishirakuraman and found that he was gone. He remembered that Tetsuya was younger than the Sandame of his time, which would make him even younger than Naruto now. The Ishirakuraman won't exist for decades, Naruto thought as tears welled up in his eyes. After observing a moment of silence for the loss of the Ishirakuraman, Naruto decided to eat at a barbecue before going to buy clothes and provisions. After finishing his lunch, Naruto walked into a shinobi supply store, but he wasn't sure what to buy. He was no longer a chunin, so the traditional Konoha shinobi costume he would wear in the future was no longer appropriate. But he finally realized that orange was not an appropriate color for a shinobi, so going back to one of his 2 orange suits was also ruled out. She finally decided on some black shinobi sandals and some standard black shinobi pants with bandages on the ankles. The outfit was completed with a tight mesh undershirt and a black gi with silver details on the lapels and collar. Like everything Naruto wore, he had a red spiral sewn on Tsuji's back. After ordering some extra copies of her outfit, she also bought a fully stocked supply bag, 2 crib and shuriken sets with covers, explosive tags, as well as a small kanji brush plus ink and blank scrolls. Sure of having everything he needed, Naruto paid for his purchases. As he was leaving, some weight bands caught his eye, so he used what money he had left to buy them before deciding to go to his hotel room. Once Naruto found his hotel room, he prepared to meet Sarutobi later. As she finished getting ready, she put the rest of her shopping away before realizing she was already 10 minutes late. Suddenly, a brief memory of a certain gray-haired sensei of his appeared in her mind, and she smiled. Maybe I'll try it just once. Just to see why Kakashi-sensei liked doing it so much. 30 minutes later, where could I be in the world? This was the thought that was going through Sarutobi's mind while he was still waiting for Naruto, who was already 40 minutes late. What kind of aspiring shinobi would be late for his own genin exam? He got out of his thoughts when a certain blonde finally arrived at the training camp. Hi Naruto, where were you? Sarutobi asked in a somewhat annoyed tone. You are 40 minutes late. I'm sorry, I got lost on the path of life, Naruto said, mimicking his former's trademark excuse perfectly. Or rather, future sensei. The man who would become the Sandai Myokai broke a sweat when he heard Naruto's ridiculous excuse for his tardiness. Well, now that you're here, Saru, I guess we can start, an amused Midei Myokai said as he emerged from the forest. So the two shinobi walked Naruto through the different parts of the genie exam. They were quite impressed. Except for his above-average score in Genjutsu, his performance was outstanding in all other areas. If he had been in the academy, he could have won Orochimaru the Rookie of the Year title, Sarutobi thought to himself. Now the only thing missing was the ninjutsu exam. Alright Naruto, you've done a great job so far. Only the ninjutsu part of the exam is missing. You will have to perform kawarimi substitution, cloning technical business, and realize transformation, Sarutobi explained. Without missing a beat, Naruto disappeared in a cloud of smoke, and in his place there was a log. Then he emerged from the forest, right behind where everyone was. As for the clone technique Bizan, I've always been unable to properly execute that jutsu, but Naruto formed a familiar cross-shaped seal. And shouted Kagebusen, no shadow clone jutsu. Suddenly, another Naruto appeared right next to the original, and smiled at the Okage and the future Okage. That was in front of him. He can perform Kagebusen, who in the world is this guy? Those were the thoughts of the two of them as they stared at Naruto in amazement. Go well done Naruto, now finally perform a ninja transformation. A sinister smile appeared on the face. From Naruto. They both didn't quite understand why, but for some reason, that smile filled them with fear. But before they could understand why, Oryokian no Kodo Yusi no Jutsu. Double knockout technique for girls, there was a puff of smoke, and when it cleared, Sarutobi and the Nirame were not prepared for what they saw. In front of them were two 19-year-old girls with pigtails. But what really caught their attention was that they were both very shapely and completely naked. They never had a chance. Both men screamed as they were thrown backwards against a tree, thanks to the stream of blood coming out of their noses. They both slid down the tree and fell unconscious with lewd smiles on their faces. Suddenly, the girls disappeared and left behind a Naruto, who looked extremely funny. Maybe I should have used Oryoke no Jutsu instead. My latest kinky technique might have been too much for them. It took them a few minutes, but they finally recovered. Needless to say, Naruto passed the exam with honors. The new black eye around his forehead identified him as a shinobi from Konoha. Well, Naruto, congratulations on becoming a genin of Konoha, the Okage said. You can meet with your team tomorrow morning, at 8 o'clock, at Training Camp 7. Okay, then I'll see you later, old guys, Naruto said as he turned to leave. Oh, and Naruto, said the Okage to his new shinobi, that technique and any other jutsu in Taituyo are now jutsu banned from that rank. Naruto's hotel room. Having left the training camp, Naruto went to dinner and then went straight back to his hotel, where he was left alone with his thoughts. And then he hit him. I was completely alone again. He tried to repeat to himself over and over that they had not died, but had not yet been born. But he didn't care. To be alone was to be alone. The life I had in Konoha was gone forever. Eventually, Kazama Naruto would be born. He would have a happy childhood, with a mother and a father who would love him. Everyone in Konoha would respect him as a son of the Yondaime. Eventually, he would follow in his father's footsteps and become a shinobi. One day, he might even fall in love with Hyuga and Nada. And even if Kazama Naruto could grow up and do these things, it wouldn't be him. No matter how hard he tried, Naruto couldn't stop the tears from falling. Suddenly, he realized that this was not going to fix anything. I always say I would do anything for my dear people, right? Complaining here is not going to solve anything. I have the opportunity to change the past so that your future will be different. And what if I have to stand idly by? Her old life was over, and she would have to accept it, because that life would belong to someone else. However, even if his old life had ended, that didn't mean that he couldn't forge a new one here, at this time. When the thoughts in his head started to take a more positive turn, Naruto fell asleep. Office of the Hokage. Konoha was a relatively new shinobi village, but even so, the nickname Hokage was already becoming a legend. He had helped found Konoha with his older brother. And he was feared in battle thanks to his Raijin sword and his ability to use the Suten Jutsu without the need for water. Despite his great warrior, the greatest enemy of all the Kages was always defeated by paperwork. He was an implacable enemy who never fell apart and had an infinite number of allies. So, when Sarutobi arrived at his office, he was very grateful for the distraction. Busy with the paperwork again, I see Lokage-sama. Saru, how many times do I have to tell you that you don't need to call me that? Said the nickname jokingly. Now I guess you've come with an infime. Yes, sensei, we have pushed the enemy deeper into his territory than planned. They have also suffered significant losses. The Hokage said thoughtfully as he stroked his chin, it looks like we can finally put an end to all this bloodshed. Have another battalion ready to leave with me tomorrow morning. Hopefully, we can convince them to sign a treaty instead of being forced to destroy them. Are you really planning to do it after this war is over, sensei? Yes, I think the end of a war is a propitious moment for a change. The next generation is ready to take over, except Saru. I think you will be an excellent Hokage. You are already known in the shinobi world as the professor and the shinobi god, and most importantly, you would do anything to protect your village and its people. Sarutobi was happy that his former sensei had so much faith in him. He had been selected to become the Sandai Myokai instead of his main rival, Tanzu. I'll do my best to live up to the faith that you and the Shadai placed in me. And now what about Naruto? Sarutobi asked. Well, leaving aside the fact that he lied about his origin, he seems to be a very skilled shinobi. If he proves his loyalty, I think we can expect great things from him in the future. It's strange, sensei, Sarutobi began. We both know he wasn't telling the truth about where he came from, but I'm not worried that he's a possible spy. I can't explain it, but I know I can trust him. Well, I sincerely hope that your intuition is correct. In any case, you'll be able to keep an eye on him from now on. The first four-man squad in the history of Konoha. You have a lot of work ahead of you, Saru. Naruto's hotel room alarm went off, and, without even complaining, he got up and got into the shower. After 2.5 years of constantly traveling with Jiraiya, he had woken up many times now without tempestuous. Getting up early was no longer a problem. He briefly considered the idea of being late again, and after trying once, he understood why Kakashi did it so often. It was funny to see people's reactions to his excuses. But, as it would be the first time he met his team, he decided it would be better to make a good impression. So he got dressed, went out for breakfast, and headed to training camp number 7. It was a little early, so he walked quietly by Konoha to their meeting place. It's going to be strange to see that training camp again without them, Naruto mused to himself. When he arrived at the training ground, he was paralyzed by what he saw. I had never expected this to happen. Why didn't I expect it? They were both there when I called Sarutobi, or Hissen, so it makes sense that I was put on a team with someone I knew, even if they didn't know how. Well, Naruto, welcome to Team 7. Sarutobi introduced him. He thought Hirai was already lying when he told him that Tsunade had flat-chested like Genin, given his future development. But, wow. There she was, flat-chested and all. Naruto was grateful that Orochimaru wasn't too talkative. I had greeted him, but that was all. Naruto had to use all his strength to keep his face impassive and avoid projecting murderous intentions towards the future San in Snake. But he did. But after meeting Orochimaru, he realized that someone was missing. Well, Naruto, it looks like your latest teammate is the... Sarutobi was unable to finish his sentence due to a smoke bomb that exploded in front of them. Naruto sweated out a drop. I knew what was coming next. Sure enough, as the smoke began to clear, he heard a voice. Behold the greatest shinboy of Konoha and master of stealth. The one whose supreme manhood and attractiveness can conquer women who give him. They double the age. The great Jiraiya-sama has arrived. I can't believe that now that he's 50 he's doing things that he used to do when he was 12. Naruto couldn't help but laugh as he looked at his future sensei. I'm sure his unruly white hair was much shorter, as were the red marks underneath of his eyes. But he was still Jiraiya. I wonder if he already takes a look at the hot springs at this age. Knowing him, the answer is probably yes. Although Naruto said to himself, "Well, new guy, I see that you already met Orochimaru, and you have a flat chest on him." This time, it was Jiraiya who failed to finish his sentence, courtesy of a punch from Tsunade that planted him on the ground. "Pervert. I told you to stop calling me that. It's not my fault I haven't evolved yet, Jiraiya Baka," Tsunade shouted. Unbeknownst to either of them, both Sarutobi and Naruto had the same thought running through their heads as they watched what was happening in front of them. This is going to be interesting. Naruto's first week as a member of the Sarutobi team had been, to say the least, interesting. They had spent most of their time working on range missions and teamwork exercises. And boy did they need it. Although getting used to a fourth member was not the problem. Sometimes, Naruto couldn't believe that these three Tampalian kids would become the best shinobi team Konoha would ever produce. With only a little over a week on the team, I still didn't know them very well. But that would come with time. However, he seemed to get along with Jiraiya and Tsunade naturally. I guess it's natural, even though they're just kids, I got to know their future pretty well. In some ways, I know them better than they know themselves, Naruto mused. Orochimaru, however, was another story. Naruto preferred to keep him at a distance. I knew I wasn't being completely fair. There was no guarantee that he would turn into the Orochimaru Naruto remembered, but for now he couldn't help himself. Every time I looked at him, I saw Orochimaru, a missing ninja of that rank and the biggest traitor of Konoha. There were also times when some of his gestures were eerily reminiscent of Sasuke, which struck a chord with him. And then there was Sarutobi, who, besides being 30 years younger, was still the same kind old man I had always known. Even the way he looked at Naruto and seemed to read him like a book. This would probably explain why he had been paying special attention to her. Not that I blame him, I thought no matter what he said, Ojizan would know I was lying. Putting those thoughts out of his mind, Naruto decided to finish preparing to go train with his team. After all, I was already 30 minutes late. 10 minutes later. Damn it, Sarutobi-sensei, where the hell is he? A frustrated Jiraiya shouted. While Sarutobi was looking at his other two genin, he could see that Orochimaru was visibly frustrated. And that if Naruto didn't show up soon, Tsunade might take it out on Jiraiya. Frankly, I understood his point of view. It was impossible not to get frustrated with Naruto when he was doing this. Saruto and was about to reply to Jiraiya when, "Hello," Naruto said as if nothing was wrong as he suddenly appeared. "Where the hell were you, Naruto?" shouted an enraged Tsunade. Naruto looked at his teammates with a bored expression, worthy of Kakashi attack before replying, "Sorry for being late. A group of rebel ninjas set fire to the Okage Tower, and I helped put it out." Sarutobi and Orochimaru sighed and shook their heads in disbelief. They both wondered if he would ever at least try to come up with a plausible excuse. Jiraiya and Tsunade, however, liar. Instead of answering, Naruto simply smiled at both of them sheepishly. "Well, now that our whole team is here, what are we going to do today?" "Greetings and sensei," asked Orochimaru, who had decided to speak for the first time. Sarutobi said to himself, as he seemed to be wondering the same thing. "I thought we would take a break from the rank of missions and work on an advanced chakra control exercise." At that moment, Naruto stopped paying attention to Jiraiya's complaints about wanting to be taught amazing jutsus, and to Sarutobi, who was explaining the importance of chakra control for a shinobi. Being genin, if they were going to work on chakra control, they could only do one exercise. Climbing trees, Naruto thought to himself, smiling as he remembered working himself to exhaustion in the forests of Wave Country. Suddenly, Naruto was pulled out of his reverie when Sarat Boy threw 4 cribs and onto the floor. "Each of you choose a tree and use these kunai to mark your progress, Sarutobi instructed. Orochimaru took his kunai in his hand, but before he started climbing, he tried to test exactly how much chakra he needed to stay attached to the tree. He really is a genius, Naruto thought as he couldn't help but be impressed by what Orochimaru was doing. Tsunade managed to climb about 3 meters on her first attempt before slipping. Jiraiya, on the other hand, barely managed to reach 5 meters before the bark broke and he was thrown off the tree. Nice move, Jiraiya Baka. Tsunade teased as she unceremoniously landed on the ground in a heap. Before Jiraiya could respond, Orochimaru finally started climbing his tree and got to twice as far as Tsunade, before marking his progress when he started to slip. Well done, Orochimaru, and you too, Tsunade. Jiraiya, could you learn something from how Orochimaru approached this example? Exercise, Sarutobi said. At this, Jiraiya was already furious. It's always Orochimaru this, or Orochimaru that. Suddenly, everyone noticed that Naruto had started climbing his tree. He got almost halfway there before he fell, surprising everyone, Sarutobi included. That was it? Very well, Naruto, Sarutobi praised as he stared at him. He wasn't the only one. The rest of his team also looked at him strangely, especially Orochimaru. I guess he's not used to being outgrown. Well, it's definitely better than my first time with this exercise. But judging by Ojizan's look, I guess I went a little overboard. Thank you, Sarutobi-sense, and Naruto said while smiling. I wasn't used to receiving so much positive attention. Naruto began to notice that the dynamic between Jiraiya, Orochimaru and Sarutobi was not so different from the one that existed between him, Sasuke and Kakashi. With that in mind, he couldn't help but sympathize a little with Jiraiya. So she decided to help him. Not bad for a first attempt, you two. The key is to use the right amount of chakra, he said. Naruto to his blonde and white-haired teammates, Jiraiya, you need to try to use less chakra, while you, on the other hand, Tsunade, need to use a little more. Following the advice of his colleague, they both returned to work. Tsunade began to gradually improve her progress. But Jiraiya was still having difficulties. So Naruto decided that maybe he needed a little more motivation. You know, Jiraiya, the sooner you finish this tree climbing exercise, the sooner you can go take a look at the hot springs. Naruto whispered in his teammate's ear. The white-haired boy suddenly stiffened, and Naruto was confused, as he was sure that was just what Jiraiya already needed to motivate himself. He was about to apologize when Jiraiya turned around, and Naruto saw something that amused and scared him at the same time. His teammate had a fire burning in his eyes, which a couple of individuals wearing green lycra used to call the flames of youth. Gee, I thought I could only do that to him. I guess this proves that it really exists. It's scary, but at least I won't have to listen to speeches about the jewel flames. Youth for a few decades, the former Hinchiriki thought with a shiver as he remembered how enthusiastic lay people could be and sometimes. All right, let's do it, shouted a very determined Jiraiya. Naruto couldn't help but laugh. No matter the age, beautiful women seemed to be the maximum motivation in Jiraiya's life. By the time Sarutobi decided to call it a day, he was amazed at the progress his genin had made in just one day. Naruto was 2/3 of the way up his tree, while Orochimaru was half of his. But the surprising thing was that Jiraiya had surpassed Suna. And it was only 3 meters from Orochimaru. You four have done an excellent job with this exercise. In addition to our training, I recommend that you practice it in your free time. In addition to improving chakra control, it also helps to increase your stamina and chakra reserve. Chakras. Sarutobi-sama. Sarutobi didn't have a chance to finish talking to his genin. A messenger arrived with news of the war if he had reached an agreement to end the war. But the price had been too high, the Nirame had fallen in battle. As Naruto lay on the bed in his apartment, his thoughts were erratic, but most of the time, he was thinking about different things that had happened since he arrived at that place. Her apartment reminded her that she had moved out the day the Nidame left for the front. Then his mind turned to Sarutobi and Tsunade. The death of the Nidame would probably affect them more than anyone else. To them, he was more than the leader of Konoha. For Sarutobi, he was a mentor and a friend, while for Tsunade, he was part of the family. Thinking about Tsunade had made him remember his first meeting with his new teammates. Flashback scene. The three young genin were looking at their new member with obvious confusion. The genin squads were composed of one jounin sensei and 3 genin. Why then did they include a fourth? Alright team, as you can see, we have a new member. So please, let's take a moment to introduce ourselves again. Tell us a little bit about your likes, dislikes, dreams and hobbies, Sarutobi said while looking at Naruto, indicating that she wanted him to start. Well, my name is Naruto, and I like ramen. What I don't like is the 3 minutes it takes to prepare the ramen, as well as arrogant people and traitors. My hobbies are training and learning about seals. My dream. Naruto had to pause for a moment while he pondered. His dream was to become Hokage. But that was what I still wanted. He wanted to be Hokage to gain recognition from those who looked down on him for being a Hinchuriki, in addition to being able to protect his loved ones. But he was no longer a Hinchuriki, so he directly controlled what people thought of him. He also didn't know what the consequences would be if he became the Yondaime instead of his father. My dream is to be the biggest Shinboy in the history of Konoha, and to be happy. Sarutobi watched Naruto for a moment. Whether he knew it or not, his dream had revealed something about him. Becoming the best Shinboy in Konoha's history was a big goal, but the determination in his eyes made it hard to doubt him. What caught Sarutobi's attention was what he said next. He expressed it in a way that made it seem as if he had led a troubled life. I wonder what happened to you, Naruto. Seeing that Naruto had finished, the other blonde on his team decided to go after and introduce herself. I'm Tsunade, I like my family, and I don't like perverts. At this point, he shot a withering glance in Jiraiya's direction. My hobbies are spending time with my little brother and studying anatomy. My dream is to become a great kunoichi and make my grandfather and great-uncle proud. Naruto couldn't help but notice that she was already starting on the path to becoming a legendary medical ninja. I am the great Jiraiya. I like beautiful women, and I don't like immature ones like Orochimaru. My hobbies are training and spending time at the hot springs. Well, research. However, I never thought much about a dream for the future. He doesn't even write Icha Icha Paradise, and already calls it research. My name is Orochimaru. I don't like a lot of things, and I dislike noisy and annoying people. My hobbies are training and learning jutsu. And my future goal is to become the best ninja in the shinobi world. Being the best ninjutsu user in the world seemed like a good goal. Naruto wondered at what point along the way he veered into the quest for immortality. But maybe it doesn't have to be like last time. End of the flashback. Naruto decided to stop remembering and go for a walk. He couldn't help but notice how gloomy the atmosphere was in Konoha. A testament to how much they would miss their Hokage. No one had much time to mourn Ojizen's death. We all had to focus on recognizing. Build the village, the blonde thought sadly. Somehow, while walking, Naruto came to the hot springs. He felt a familiar chakra distortion that indicated to him that he was not alone. You know, Jiraiya, even on days like today, the women of Konoha will send you to the hospital. For staring, the blonde said towards the nearby wall while smiling. At first nothing happened, but then the figure of a person seemed to emerge from the wall. When this person dropped his camouflage, he was effectively Naruto's white-haired teammate. How the hell did you know I was here? No one has detected me while using this jutsu, Hiria asked with a mixture of surprise and indignation. Well, I guess I'm full of surprises. I probably regret asking, but what exactly are you doing here? Well, this is a pretty sad time for Konoha. I decided to come here and do some research to clarify my ideas and hopefully cheer myself up a bit, Jiraiya replied. I see. So investigating must be what they call nowadays being a pervert. Don't fucking call me a pervert. Jiraiya shouted without thinking. Instantly, a wave of terror swept over Jiraiya, and Naruto smiled sarcastically, knowing what was coming next. Noises of movement and angry women were heard coming from the other side of the wall. At that moment, Naruto decided to quickly escape and headed towards the trees. I don't want to go too far, I might miss the show. Before Jiraiya could berate his partner for abandoning him, he felt an incredible murderous intensity behind his back. When he turned around, he saw a horde of women dressed only with towels. Of bathroom. Jiraiya forgot for a moment that these women were about to commit him and started drooling at the sight of him. That only made them angrier. Hidden among the treetops, a blond man watched as the mob of women beat Jiraiya almost to death. Sitting there, he felt a smile draw on his face. Just for an instant, while talking to Jiraiya and now, watching him being beaten by angry women, it felt like the old days. When the women left, Naruto climbed down from the trees and pulled Jiraiya out of the crater where the women had him. They had dropped. Laughing once more at the expense of his companion, he headed to the hospital. I forgot that she is only 12 years old, she has not perfected any body hardening techniques yet. Anyway, sooner or later he deserved it. Jiraiya did not stay in the hospital for long. He only needed attention for minor cuts and bruises. Well, mild for a shinboy. However, the doctor became curious, and Jiraiya refused to tell anyone how he had injured himself. After healing Jiraiya, the two genin wandered around the village for a while. Naruto, of course, made fun of Jiraiya's previous situation. They went to eat before deciding to go their separate ways. The next morning, Naruto woke up and started preparing for Nidame's funeral. He seduced, ate, put on his all-black shinobi funeral suit, and left the house. The first thing Naruto noticed was that, unlike the Sandame's funeral, it wasn't raining. The whole village turned out to pay tribute to their fallen leader. Sarutobi, dressed in his Okage robe, along with his former teammates, Udatane Koru and Mitokado Omura, spoke briefly about his former sensei. Tsunade, standing next to Naruto, was trying her best to keep her composure, but tears kept pouring down her face. Next to him was Nawaki, his 5-year-old brother. Naruto assumed that she and the Nidame were close. After all, he was her great-uncle. He put his arm around her and flashed a smile that he hoped was reassuring when she turned to look at him. He didn't say anything, he just stood there, hugging her, hoping that at least he would comfort her a little. After everyone laid a white flower on his coffin, the funeral was over. Sarutobi informed his team before leaving that they would meet at the usual place the next day to resume their training. Tsunade's parents took Nawaki and left, while Tsunade left alone in the opposite direction. For some reason, Naruto felt that she shouldn't be alone, so he accompanied her. Naruto didn't know what to say and assumed that Tsunade didn't seem to have much desire to talk, so they walked in silence. Apparently, Tsunade did not have a definite destination. She just wasn't ready to go home, so they just walked around Konoha. After about half an hour, Tsunade finally made her way back home. Upon arrival, Naruto simply said goodbye and hugged her before going home. When he turned the corner, he missed Tsunade's smile and a silent thank you before entering. The week after Nidame's funeral, the Sarutobi team returned to normal. They resumed their usual schedule of missions and training. Since Sarutobi was now the Sandame, it was difficult for him to balance training his team with managing Konoha. So it was not uncommon for him to send a group of Kagebun without lost clones shadows to work with his team when he was busy. It had been 6.5 months since the funeral, and Sarutobi was preparing his genin for the Chunin exams. There was one a few weeks after Nidame's funeral, but Sarutobi wouldn't let his team in. He preferred instead to further develop the skills of his team and give them the opportunity to gain more experience. Jiraiya, of course, was furious about not being able to enter, but he recognized that having the Okage as sensei would make them a difficult target. They didn't need the fact that they were newbies to make things worse. After all, for a genin team to enter a Chunin exam at the first opportunity was something almost unheard of. And so they were finishing their last training session. Tomorrow morning they would leave. Very well, good job you four, Sarutobi said before adopting a serious expression that he had only been seen a few times. Before everyone goes home, I'd like to talk to you. What is it, Sarutobi-sensei? asked a curious Orochimaru. Well, as you know, tomorrow we will leave for Kusagakure, where the Chunin exams will be held. Sensei, isn't Kusagakure a relatively new village? Why are the exams not held in one of the larger villages? Tsunade asked, puzzled. As you all know, there has been a great conflict between all the elemental nations lately. Although the fighting has stopped, the hostility between the villages is still quite high, and frankly, it was a better idea to conduct the exams in a smaller, neutral village, Sarutobi explained. So basically no one trusts anyone else, right, Sarutobi-sensei? Naruto said. I guess that's pretty accurate. Now remember, I want everyone to be careful. It is known that there have been deaths during these exams. But despite the danger, I want everyone to do their best. Sensei. All four genin responded simultaneously. With that, all the Sarutobi team members went their separate ways and returned home to prepare for tomorrow. I hope these Chunin exams will be less bumpy than the first one, the blonde shinobi thought. Ironically, the person responsible for all the problems during that exam was now a colleague of his. These were Naruto's thoughts as he packed everything he thought was necessary for the exam. Given his previous experiences with the Chunin exam, he couldn't help but be cautious and packed a little more of everything. While packing, he was also wondering what the exams would be like, how strong the other teams would be, and also if he would be promoted to Chunin. All over Konoha, thoughts similar to these were also in the minds of his other three teammates. Naruto woke up early the next morning and got ready to leave his apartment. After showering, eating and checking his provisions, he decided to head to the front door. After all, this is quite important, so I'll do something better than be on time. I'll be early, Naruto thought with a smile as he tried to imagine the reaction of his teammates. Team. He arrived at the door 20 minutes early and realized that the only person there was an Orochimaru with a surprised face. Even after so long, he still couldn't get that apprehension about the future Sannin snake out of his head. But he had long ago decided to make a serious effort to get to know Orochimaru. After all, it didn't have to happen the same way. Suddenly, Naruto came out of his thoughts when Orochimaru spoke. I'm surprised to see you here so early, Orochimaru said. Well, what can I say? I like to keep them on their toes, Naruto replied with a smile. For a brief second, Naruto could have sworn that he saw a small smile on Orochimaru's face, but a moment later it disappeared. And he simply ignored it. A long, awkward silence followed the brief conversation between the two boys. This only served to remind Naruto how far he would go to keep Orochimaru at a distance. He also recalled, when he was warned, that his behavior did not only affect him. Flashback scene. Well, today, we are going to do sparring in pairs, only taijutsu. Jiraiya will train with Tsunade, and then Orochimaru will train with Naruto, Sarutobi explained. Jiraiya and Tsunade looked at each other briefly before turning to face Naruto. For some reason, Naruto made an effort to have nothing to do with Orochimaru. They thought he would try to sneak out of his job. And sure enough, Naruto was about to express his objections to working with Orochimaru when, damn, I can't take this anymore, he shouted an angry Tsunade. Naruto, I don't know what the hell is wrong with Orochimaru, but get over it. We are a team, the four of us. And it's time for you to start acting like it. End of the flashback. And just like that, Tsunade put Naruto in his place. He could have sworn that for an instant, he saw Tsunade Bachin yelling at him instead of her partner. So, like a good guy, he decided to work on his relationship with Orochimaru. Who would have thought she could be as scary at 12 as she was at 50, Naruto thought to himself. So, how do you feel about our chances in the Chunin exams, Orochimaru? I'm not sure. They say that exams are extremely difficult, especially on the first attempt of a genie squad. But I still hope to do well even if I don't get promoted, Naruto's pale companion replied. Both boys continued to have a relaxed conversation about the exams, and when their classmates arrived, they also joined in. This was the scene that greeted Sarutobi, when the four boys finally arrived, discussing the exam. Seeing the four of them finally starting to bond, he couldn't help but smile. All right, it's time to go. It's almost a 6-day journey westward to Kusagakure. However, the exam starts at 7, so the sooner we arrive, the more time they will have to rest, the Sandaime told his team. Are all four of you ready? Hello, Sensei. And with this the five set out westward, bound for Kusunoken and the land of grass. Most of the journey passed through the land of fire, which passed without incident for Naruto. During his training with Jiraiya, he had been all over the fire country, as well as a few other places. However, I had never been to Kusa, so I was looking forward to seeing what it was like. So Naruto paid special attention to how the landscape was starting to change. The lush green forests of Inoken and Tierra del Fuego began to become scarce and eventually gave way to open plains. That marked the beginning of the grass country. After a few more hours, the Sarutobi team was crossing a dense forest. Bamboo forest. Naruto paid special attention, as he had never seen anything like it. After all, bamboo was non-existent in Konoha. All right, team. If we speed up the pace, we will reach Kusagakure hidden grass in an hour, Sarutobi said as he accelerated. And so, Naruto was pulled out of his place of interest as the team sped along. As his sensei had said, they found themselves at the gates of Kusagakure in less than an hour. For the genin who had never left the land of fire, a different hidden village was quite a sight. From what they had seen, Kusanokuni was mainly a mixture of bamboo forests, slightly rocky terrain, and, of course, grassy plains. The village seemed to be naturally surrounded by a bamboo forest, so in general there was no need for the high walls that Konoha say. The village itself was smaller than Konoha, but it had a completely different appearance and atmosphere. If Naruto had to choose one word to describe Kusa, it would be green. In fact, even within the village, there was an abundance of vegetation, whether it was fields of grass, trees, or other exotic plants. Other than that, most of the buildings and shops looked normal. Many of the various shops, clan houses, and other structures would not be out of tune in any other shinobi village. However, the only exception was his cage tower. It was huge, easily the tallest building in the village, something normal in a shinobi village. But the unusual thing was the construction material of the tower. It seemed to be made of an elegant marble. Naruto couldn't help but notice that it looked more like a sculpture than the place where the strongest shinobi in the village spent his time. While the Sarutobi team was moving through the village towards their hotel, all the team members were concentrating on the exam. Naruto radiated a certain calmness. Orochimaru had adopted a neutral expression. Hirai already had an arrogant smile. But Tsunade seemed somewhat worried. It's weird to see Tsunade like that. What will be the problem? Naruto thought in silence. His time with his new team had given him a much better understanding of women than he previously possessed at the age of 12. So I knew it was better to catch Tsunade alone before trying to find out. Watering down the problem, instead of putting it on the spot in front of everyone. Naruto decided to keep his mouth shut while they continued on their way. After checking in, the team headed to their rooms. Being the only kunoichi in the group, Tsunade had her own room. Naruto's arrival also divided the boys. Naruto shared a room with Jiraiya and Orochimaru with Sarutobi. Before everyone goes to their rooms, I have a couple of things to tell you. First, Chunin's exams officially start tomorrow at 9. Here are your entrance passes, Sarutobi said as he handed a piece of paper to each of his students. That form contains all the necessary information for your first exam tomorrow. This is all the information you will receive for now. Also, I remind you that your greatest asset in this exam is teamwork. Best of luck to everyone. And with that, Sarutobi made a single seal and disappeared in a cloud of smoke. Damn, I really need to learn that jutsu, Jiraiya and Naruto said simultaneously. It was almost dinner time when they arrived at the hotel, so the four companions decided to have something to eat before going to bed. At Naruto's insistence, they ended up at a ramen bar. There he proceeded to try all the local flavors. All 10 of them. Both Naruto's teammates and the owner of the ramen stand looked at the growing pile of empty ramen bowls next to Naruto. With a mixture of amazement and disgust. "Naruto, how the fuck can you eat so much ramen?" Jiraiya shouted in frustration and disgust. At this, Naruto stopped eating, looked up and replied with a single sentence. "I love ramen." Before returning to devour any plate of his favorite food that was in front of him. Anyway, Jiraiya continued, "I am looking forward to the exams starting tomorrow, so that the world can witness the amazing skill of the great Jiraiya-sama. Who knows, I might even kick your ass, palaface." The only external sign that Orochimaru had heard Jiraiya was a movement over his left eyebrow, signifying his anger. It would be unwise to underestimate the other test takers. And besides, it's impossible for me to defeat someone as stupid as you, Jiraiya Baka, Orochimaru said. Watching the two come and go like that, Naruto couldn't help but laugh. And think about how different it was to see this happening from a stranger's perspective. Naruto turned briefly to the left and noticed that his fourth companion was gone. As quietly as he could, he paid for his meal and left the stall to look for his disobedient companion. Luckily, Naruto found Tsunade where he looked for her. He was outside a local casino, watching everything. When he saw Naruto, he decided to keep walking, this time to his hotel. They walked in complete silence. However, Naruto was watching his companion closely and noticed that something was bothering her. Upon entering his room, Naruto decided it was time to break the silence. "So, Tsunade, I can see that something is bothering you. Do you want to talk about it?" Naruto asked gently. The two stared at each other for what seemed like an eternity, with Naruto simply waiting for Tsunade to explain what was wrong. And Tsunade debating whether or not she really wanted to tell him. She didn't know what it was, but something in those blue eyes made Tsunade want to trust him. "Well, I was thinking about the Chunin exams." And Naruto was already back in his room. I had spent a lot of time talking to Tsunade. Longer than any of them had imagined. Not that it bothered him, he enjoyed talking to Tsunade. Now she was trying to get ready to go to sleep, but for some reason she couldn't explain, she was restless. "I don't know why I can't sleep. This Chunin test is going to be completely normal." Well, as normal as anything in the shinobi world. It's not like I have to worry about Orochimaru's invasion. So, why do I have a feeling that something is going to happen during these exams? Doing his best to put those thoughts aside, Naruto soon fell asleep. He woke up a little early the next morning. I was too excited to sleep. Although this would be his third Chunin exam, Naruto was still looking at him eagerly. So he showered, ate, and then got dressed and got together the equipment he would need today. Naruto left the room just as Jiraiya was starting to wake up and decided to wait for his team in the lobby. A little less than an hour later, the 4 members of the Sarutobi team were heading to where the first part of the exam would be useful. Their faces showed absolute determination. Thinking about his team and this exam, Naruto couldn't help but smile mentally. They'll never know what happened to them. The third time was not so impressive. That was what Naruto couldn't help but think as he watched the assembled genin. He noticed that most of them cast rather hostile glances at the Sarutobi team. I guess being personally coached by the Hokage and also being the only team with a 4th genin puts us in a very difficult situation. How lucky for us, Naruto thought dryly. Meanwhile, the rest of the Naruto team was doing their best to disguise any apprehension they might feel. Upon seeing the hostility everyone seemed to be showing towards them. Although Orochimaru and Jiraiya did it better than Tsunade. His refusal to show weakness was the only thing that kept him from trembling at the angry stares that were directed at them. As the Sarutobi team headed towards an unoccupied corner of the room, they never noticed that a team of Iwa and Kiri was paying special attention to them. "So that's the Hokage team, huh?" asked one of the genin Kiri, who had his black hair tied in a ponytail. "Yes, but they don't look like much," one of her teammates, a brown-haired Kunoichi, replied. Before the last of Team Kiri, a blue-haired ninja, could come to terms with his teammate, he was interrupted. "You Kirinin would do well not to underestimate anyone trained by the god of shinobi. A voice was heard coming from right next to the Kiri team, which belonged to an Iowa ninja with long silver hair and muscular build. They are certainly very skilled, especially that blonde guy. While the Iowa ninja was talking, his eyes never left Naruto. As they waited for their supervisors, Tsunade couldn't help but say so. Obviously, someone has a feeling that people here are paying special attention to us. I guess being Okage students, our reputation precedes us, Orochimaru said with the calm and monotony he had become famous for. To be able to say that you defeated the Okage students would be quite an achievement. Yes, or that's what people are upset about, since we are a team of 4, Hiraya stated. Either way, it seems that almost everyone is eager to shoot us, Swande thought to herself. Suddenly, Tsunade noticed a comforting hand on her shoulder, and as she turned around, she noticed the smiling face of her blonde-haired teammate. "Don't worry, Tsunade, we'll do fine," Naruto said encouragingly. For some reason he couldn't understand at the time, that simple statement from Naruto seemed to completely renew his confidence. "Thank you, Naruto-kun," Tsunade said. As soon as the words left his mouth, he realized that he had indeed just said it out loud. It was then that his face took on an interesting cherry-red hue. As if his neck had a will of its own, he raised his head to take a look at his companions. Naruto and Orochimaru kept what was on their minds at that moment to themselves, and simply responded with raised eyebrows. Unfortunately, Jiraiya was not so kind. "Oh, Naruto-kun, I do now. I had no idea they were already so well," Jiraiya joked with a piteous smile. Tsunade quickly came out of her embarrassment and handed Hiraya a one-way ticket to the flat. Silly, Orochimaru thought. No matter what happens, I guess Erosanin will always be a cow, Naruto thought as he shook his head in exasperation. It was at that moment that the supervisors of the Chunin exam arrived. The chief supervisor was generally modest, except for a horizontal scar on his face that ran down his cheeks. "Welcome to the Chunin Kusagakure exam. I will be your main proctor at this stage of the exam. When you call your team, accompany your respective supervisor to the assigned meeting room. Upon arrival, he will begin his examination," the Kusa ninja explained dryly. One by one, the supervisors called each team and led them to the upper floor, to the meeting room. After about half of the teams had been called. "Konoya Sarutobi team, please follow me," a female Kusa Chunin said. Without a word, the 4 genin stood up and followed the supervisor who had called them to the next floor of the building they were in. This floor consisted of what appeared to be mainly offices. Soon after, the Sarutobi team members found themselves in a small room that had been designed to resemble a mission planning area. "I will be your supervisor during this part of the exam. You can call me Taka," the woman stated. "Well, Taka-san, what are our instructions for the first exam?" Orochimaru asked. Before answering, Taka took out a scroll from his bag and summoned a folder with documents from inside. This year, the initial stage of the Chunin exam will be a kind of mock mission. His team is tasked with retrieving vital documents from a similar location. For sure. This folder contains all the necessary information for your mission. I will remain in the room to answer any questions you may have. You have 2 hours to plan your mission from now on. And with that, Taka handed the gens to them in the document folder and let them get to work. When reviewing the documents, it was indicated that the examination would be held near the northeastern area of the grass country, near the border with the land country. In short, they were to head to an outpost about 10 kilometers from their initial position and retrieve a document. In reality, however, it was much more complicated. For one thing, they weren't the only team assigned to retrieve a document, and there were only so many. On the other hand, not all computers were assigned to retrieve a document. Some were assigned to secure the complex and its surroundings. After about 30 minutes of reviewing the information that was given to them, Jiraiya was the first to speak. "Damn, this could be complicated. Not only do we have to reach our destination within the deadline, but we also have to arrive fast enough to make sure we get a document and avoid the others. Other teams tried to stop us. Looking at the map of the area they had been given, Orochimaru suddenly had an idea. Taka-san, would it be acceptable if we made individual copies of the map for ourselves? Oh, that's allowed, Taka replied as he struggled to keep the smile strong out of his face. Tsunade, Jiraiya, and Orochimaru went to copy the map onto a spare scroll. However, Naruto thought to take a different approach. Before any of his teammates could ask why he wasn't copying the map, he stood up and made a single cross-shaped stamp. Kujebansen no Shadow Clone Technique Jutsu. When 4 Naruto clones suddenly emerged and set out to make copies of the map, 4 people gasped. After all, a genin shouldn't be able to create Kujeban without shadow clones. Well, this group is definitely full of surprises, Taka thought. The Narutos ignored the surprise of their companions and continued copying the map. Once the maps were finished, the team spent the rest of the time reviewing the strategy. They decided to get to the complex as soon as possible, avoiding combat whenever possible. Since it was impossible to know how well guarded the complex would be, they decided to plan their infiltration once there. The last thing they did before time ran out was to discuss what to do in case they got separated. It was at this point that Taka once again. He made his presence known. Well, your 2 hours are up. Congratulations on passing the first exam, she exclaimed cheerfully. The surprise was evident on the faces of Tsunade, Jiraiya, and Orochimaru. Naruto, however, had his back to everyone, so no one could see his face. Suddenly, he started laughing. Damn it! Why didn't I think of that? It was said. What the hell is so funny? And how come we just passed the first exam? The first exam is what we've been planning for 2 hours, Jiraiya said with an angry tone, obvious. Not appreciating that he was left out. The Chunin are expected to be able to effectively lead a squad of shinobi, which makes them responsible for the lives of their companions. They must not only be able to lead a mission effectively, but they must also plan it effectively. Those who recklessly throw themselves into situations without preparation will end up with the death of themselves or their companions. That garbage is not acta to become Chunin, Taka explained. Remember what the head supervisor told us in the meeting room. He said the exam would start as soon as we separated. Naruto said with a funny tone. And so it was, but although they did not know that they were being examined, they more than passed. They have the rest of the day off. Meet at the place indicated on the map tomorrow at 10 a.m. to start the second exam. And, again, congratulations on passing the first one, Taka said before opening the room and letting everyone out. While the genin of Konoha were off to enjoy the rest of the day and get ready for the next day, Taka couldn't help but be impressed. The location team had passed with flying colors. Those four are something special. I have a feeling that one day the whole shinobi world will know their names, she thought to herself with a smile before she left. Very well. We did great in the first exam, Jiraiya shouted excitedly, pleased with his team's recent success. Said genin team was walking the streets of Kusa, enjoying the rest of the day and looking for their sensei. After all, Sarutobi would certainly be interested to know how his team performed. However, one of them decided to express something that he had in mind since the exam. Naruto started Orochimaru, attracting the attention of his companions when you learned Kujeban without shadow clone. Suddenly, Tsunade and Jiraiya already had their eyes on their other 2 teammates, as they too had been wondering where Naruto had learned such an advanced skill. Looking at Orochimaru, Naruto noticed that he had the same look as when they did the tree climbing exercise all those months ago. A mixture of curiosity with a slight touch of jealousy. A look that, surprisingly, his teammates imitated. Shit, Naruto thought to himself, he should have known they wouldn't let him through. They seem to think that Ojizan has been showing me some things on his own. Well, that's not the case. But again, I learned that after stealing the Forbidden Scroll, almost 40 years from now, that won't work either. Sarutobi-sensei, and I haven't been training in secrets, and that's what some of you are thinking. At this, the traits of his teammates softened slightly, but where I learned is a secret. Suddenly, Naruto turned down an almost deserted street, and although he was a little confused about where he was headed, his team followed him anyway. Tsunade and Hiraya seemed to accept that they weren't going to get anything more out of him. Orochimaru, on the other hand, was about to question Naruto when the blonde in question stopped moving and turned around. "You could come out right now." Suddenly, 3 blots jumped and landed in front of Naruto and his team. He recognized them as Kiri's team without even needing to look at hesitate. Faced with the sudden appearance of enemy genin from another village, Tsunade and Hiraya unsheathed their kume and assumed defensive positions. Orochimaru and Naruto, on the other hand, didn't seem threatened by these newcomers at all. At least to the untrained eye. Wow, are all the Konoha ninjas this nervous?" asked the tallest of the trio. A blue-haired boy holding a sheathed katana in the left hand. "Why don't you tell us what you came to say and stop following us?" Tsunade said. The blue-haired ninja from earlier spoke very well again. Tsunade. "I guess it's prudent that we get to the point of our visit." This statement caused the Sarutobi team to arch their eyebrows. "I guess we shouldn't be surprised that you know about us," Orochimaru said. After all, most shinobi wanted to keep an eye on any shinobi trained by the cage of another village. It was at this point that the only woman of the Kiri team spoke. Tsunade, Hiraya, Orochimaru and Naruto, students of Sarutobi. The Sandaime Okage, also known as Professor God of Shinboi. "We came here to tell you that the 4 of you will be our targets for this exam. We will defeat them." During this entire meeting, the 3rd member of Kiri's team, a black-haired boy tied in a ponytail, who had 2 oromabi and sheathed on his lower back, never took his eyes off Naruto. And to be honest, he was starting to get a little angry. "It looks like you have something to tell me," Naruto said. "My name is Ken Kakutesu. I hope to test my skills against you, Naruto," the boy who called himself Taisu said. Naruto noticed that a thick fog began to form on the street they were on, and when it cleared, Kiri's team had disappeared. "That guy Taisu reminds me of Itachi, and that can't be a good thing." When their unexpected visitors left, the Sarutobi team decided to continue on their way. They had barely been walking for a few minutes when Naruto's stomach decided to make its presence felt. While the growls of Naruto's stomach attracted the attention of his entire team, he simply put his hand behind his head and smiled sheepishly. "Anyone want to join me for ramen?" At this point, Tsunade, Hiraya, and Orochimaru sweated up a drop before leaving Naruto alone to look for his favorite food. He took it as a no. 8 bowls of ramen later, Naruto decided to call it a day, but instead of going back to his hotel, he decided to keep walking around Kusa. After a while, he found himself in what he deduced must be a training area. The sun was just beginning to set, and, for some reason he couldn't explain, Naruto felt the need to watch it. Suddenly, Naruto looked back, and through a crib, and into the bushes. "You know, I'm really sick of people following me today," he said in an annoyed tone. A boy with long silver hair and muscular build emerged from the bushes. Naruto identified him as an Iwa ninja by the atate he wore around his neck. He also noticed that this mysterious ninja had trapped his crib and between 2 fingers. "I apologize for following you all day. I was just hoping to meet you alone before introducing myself," the guy said in a cheerful tone. "My name is Ayabashi Toshiro. It's a pleasure to meet you, Kazama Naruto." With his introduction, he extended his hand, which Naruto shook. "Well, it looks like you already know who I am," Naruto said with a mocking smile. "Of course I do, and now that we've introduced ourselves, I'm saying goodbye. The next time we meet, I will kill you," Toshiro said with a smile. "Will you do it now? May I ask why you want me to die?" "Certainly, I think apart from me, I could be the strongest genin in this exam," Tusir continued speaking in the same cheerful tone. "That's why I want to fight with you, and when we do I will kill you." "I see," Naruto said, "you like to fight in the toughest competition. Well, you seem very confident that you will defeat me. It may not be so easy." Suddenly, Toshiro threw the crib at him and Naruto. Naruto caught it with a finger through the ring on the end, inches from hitting his eye. At this, Toshiro smiled even more broadly. Oh, I definitely don't expect it to be easy, Naruto. In fact, I hope it's the opposite. After all, easy deaths are never satisfying. Hain. After saying goodbye, Toshiro performed a body blow, leaving Naruto alone again. It seems that a lot of people are interested in fighting with me. This should be fun, Naruto thought to himself as he decided to head back to his hotel and get some sleep. After all, tomorrow was a big day. The next day, start zone of the second exam. When the Sarutobi team reached their starting point, they saw Taka waiting to greet them. Well, they got here early, so now we can get started. As you know, you are the only 4-member team, so there will be a small change in the parameters of your exam. Instantly, the 4 genin were a little wary, especially Naruto, who didn't like where he thought this was going. But it was Jiraiya who spoke. What do you mean by a slight change? At this, a sadistic smile appeared on Taka's face that reminded him too much. To Naruto, to Mitaras and Anko. Well, the 4 of you will be separated, and you will have to find the missing members of your team before continuing with your mission. Suddenly, 2 Hounen Kusa appeared out of nowhere, grabbed Naruto, and applied Shunsin body flicker to an unknown place. Before any of the 3 remaining team members could make any kind of protest, Taka threw a scroll at them. That's another map showing the general area where Naruto is now, and he's been given one to show his location. Your second exam starts now. Have fun, guys, Taka said cheerfully before disappearing. Location still unknown. The 2 Hounen who had kidnapped him had just given Naruto a speech similar to the one Taka had given to his companions before disappearing. As Naruto watched the mountain range where he had been left, he had only one thought. Well, this is not my luck. After a year of delay in the Chunin exams by their sensei, the Sarutobi team could honestly say that they were excited to finally be able to participate. Because, in retrospect, they could say with certainty that the extra year of missions and training had been invaluable. Since his arrival, every member of the team realized that he surpassed most of the others in skill. Besides, they had one more partner than everyone else, and they felt pretty confident about themselves. At least until the second exam, the Sarutobi team had split up. Not only did they have to complete their task, but they also had to do it as a complete team, which means they had to find Naruto. And this is precisely what the blonde's 3 remaining teammates were trying to do, jumping between the trees, looking for their 4th team member. Damn it, where the hell is Naruto? A furious Jiraiya shouted. The map they had been given after separating from Naruto showed the area where they would locate him. It was close to the border between Iwa and Kusa to the north, which, unfortunately, was the completely opposite direction to their destination, which was closer to the border that Kusa shared with Aim to the south. Luckily, I was no more than noon away. I told you we should have waited for him to find us, instead of the opposite, Orochimaru stated. We had to try Orochimaru. We couldn't leave him here alone and wait for him to crash into us, Tsunade said with a frown. He can take care of himself, but that doesn't matter. As we said, if we don't find him before nightfall, we will head to where the documents we need are located. No matter what happens, he knows that we must all be there to complete this exam. Tsunade was about to berate Orochimaru for looking so cold when Jiraiya spoke. I hate to burst your bubble, Tsunade, but the pale face is right, Jiraiya said, earning a withering look from Orochimaru. All we're going to do aimlessly searching is waste our time. Well, I seem to be outnumbered, but there's not much point in aimlessly searching around hoping to get lucky. I'm just worried about him, the granddaughter of the first cage said. His 2 remaining teammates nodded in agreement, and with that the 3 of them turned to head in the opposite direction, unaware of the eyes watching them from the shadows. While the other members of the Sarutobi team had decided to abandon the search, Naruto was descending a mountain range. He wondered, and not for the first time, what would happen if he tried to summon a toad to help him get down. How lucky for me, they had to separate me from them. I just hope they don't waste their time looking for me, the blonde thought to himself. Looking down, Naruto noticed, dismayed, that he had barely made any progress in the descent of the mountain he was on. The memories of Jiraiya throwing him down a ravine to motivate him to summon correctly kept tormenting him. That's why he was a little afraid of jumping down the mountain, because he wasn't sure if he could use chakra to attach to it. But then again, when Uzumaki, or rather Kazama Naruto, had played it safe. And with that, Konoha's potential Chunin gathered chakra on the soles of his feet and jumped down. Orochimaru was restless. Ever since they had abandoned Naruto's quest to head towards their goal, I had the feeling that they were being watched. As he looked both ways, he saw that his two companions were noticing him as well. That fool from Hirai has already figured it out. I guess all that ridiculous spying has some purpose, Orochimaru thought. They had been stalking their prey for hours, and, until now, they had gone unnoticed. When Konoha's Genin paused for the day, his team decided it was time to attack. Just a few more minutes, and the precious Genin team of the Sandai Myokai would be nothing more than corpses. The Sarutobi team was gathered around a campfire, eating field rations in relative silence. After all, it had been a very difficult day, separated, and with doubts about whether it would be better to locate Naruto, or move towards his goal to increase his chances of finding him. While they were sitting there, they didn't notice the three shadows that were silently moving to bring them all down simultaneously. One of the hidden assailants could hardly believe it. These Konoha ninjas were completely inept. Sneaking up on them was easier than basic academy training. It was almost enough for him to think about attacking head-on and being able to look them in the eye as they died. But there was no need to be reckless, pitiful excuses, for shinobi like this did not deserve to see the faces of those who killed them. So much for being trained by the shinobi god himself. But what should one expect from a tree-hugging Konoha ninja? And with that, 3 sets of Kyuna and Shuriken hit Orochimaru, Tsunade, and Jiraiya simultaneously. And also as a single one, where once there were 3 Konoha ninjas, now there were only 3 trunks instead. Before the 3 alleged unknown attackers could verbalize their surprise, they heard the sound of 3 tags exploding just in time to react, before they were blown to pieces. As the debris from the explosion disappeared, the Geninsuna trio, now revealed, found themselves a little worse for wear, but still in one piece. "You really shouldn't have underestimated us like that," a decidedly feminine voice said from above. Looking towards the tree line, Suna's team saw Tsunade and Orochimaru casually leaning against a tree. "Hey, wait a minute, where the hell is the erg?" The supposed leader of the Suna trio, a nondescript older boy with short brown hair, did not have a chance to finish his question. Because at that moment, Jiraiya appeared out of nowhere, sticking a cradle and on his shoulder, and throwing to others at his companions. That they were dodged. Jiraiya sneered at his injured opponent before forming a major seal, manual, and disappear into thin air. The entire Suna team jumped back and adopted a guard position, desperately trying to locate Jiraiya before he attacked again. Suddenly, someone dropped a smoke bomb, and from inside the smoke, behold the ultimate invincible technique of this one. Stealth espionage Totan no Jutsu, transparent escape technique. Prepare for defeat at the hands of the shinobi, unparalleled in all shinobi nations, the great Jiraiya-sama. As soon as the smoke cleared, everyone in the clearing saw Jiraiya in what everyone considered the most ridiculous pose ever. Noticing that no one seemed impressed, Jiraiya adopted a fighting stance, while his 2 companions crouched down next to him. The Suna trio cursed their luck. They had assumed that the Sarutobi team was nothing more than a bunch of spoiled kids playing at being ninjas. They completely ignored that the Sandai Myokai was considered the best shinobi alive, so any of his disciples would certainly be skilled. Underestimating them resulted in one of his teammates being left unable to use an arm, creating a serious mismatch. Both teams were facing each other, but no one moved. Suddenly, the members of the Sarutobi team rushed forward to confront their attackers, hoping to create enough distance to separate their opponents from their teammates. Hirai was already able to separate the Suna Genin he had already injured from his 2 teammates. But Orochimaru and Tsunade were unsuccessful in that regard. With Jiraiya, how could this white-haired idiot hurt me? This was the thought that crossed the injured Geninsuna's head as he dodged a series of punches and kicks from Jiraiya. Suddenly, one of Jiraiya's punches sneaked through his guard, hit his jaw, and sent him rolling on the floor. The white-haired Konoha ninja took the opportunity to perform a series of hand seals before taking a deep breath. Ketongo Kakyu no Jutsu, Great Fireball Technique. Seeing a gigantic fireball heading towards him, the Suna ninja wisely decided to dodge it. The kunai, still lodged in his shoulder, did not completely disable his arm, but it was so severe that he could not even try to exchange ninjutsu with his opponent. What I needed was a distraction. In an instant of inspiration, he pulled the white cradle off his shoulder and threw it between himself and his opponent, with an explosive tag around the handle. He wasn't close enough to Jiraiya to cause him harm, although he didn't realize it at the last moment. But it did provide the distraction he was hoping for. Damn it, what the hell are you up to? The future Sack Summoner wondered. Jiraiya did not reproach himself for not taking advantage of his advantage. With his opponent's arm so injured, he couldn't use ninjutsu effectively in combat. He would need more time to perform hand seals due to his injured arm. Time that Jiraiya gave him to play. Suddenly, Jiraiya jumped back as he felt a presence approaching from his left side. As the debris cleared, he noticed that the explosion had given his opponent the time needed to perform hand seals. Kazanoya was going windward, was all the ninja Suna said before attacking. Being on the defensive, Hirai already noticed that his opponent was much faster than he thought. Knowing that he would not be able to dodge forever, because he would eventually be caught and split in two, Jiraiya racked his brains desperately looking for a way to defeat Suna's signature technique. Suna's Genin was overextended in one of her cuts, which gave Jiraiya the opportunity to create distance. Thanks to a forceful punch to the face. He wasted no time in forming them by hand, and was already throwing his technique before his opponent recovered. Katen Yusenka did not hut his technique of the mythical Fire Phoenix. Unlike before, this fire technique created several smaller fireballs, which Ninja Suna had difficulty dodging when he lost his balance. Unfortunately, a fireball hit the very hand with which he was holding his technique. And futon techniques feed Katen techniques. His entire right arm burst into flames as he let out a deafening scream as he tried to cover his arm with dirt to put out the flames. Although he succeeded, the damage was already done as his entire arm was charred. But he had little time to worry about his arm as Jiraiya delivered a crushing blow to the back of his head that knocked him unconscious. Hiraiya gave his fallen opponent one last look before running out to help his teammates. With Tsuandi and Orochimaru, Hiraiya's teammates had a harder time facing their opponents who were very skilled at working as a team. Tsunade and Orochimaru, on the other hand, are not. For some strange reason, both Tsunade and Hiraiya were perfectly collaborating with Naruto instead of Orochimaru, even though they had only known Naruto for a year. On the other hand, since the formation of the Sarutobi team, Orochimaru had been listed as a prodigy. That revelation used to inflate his ego at times and make his job difficult. With the arrival of Naruto to the team, Orochimaru had become, as it were, the quarter wheel. It was a surprising revelation on Tsunade's part, one that she decided to solve as soon as possible. That's if we ever manage to get out of here, Tsuande thought as she and Orochimaru got up from the ground. So this is all that the precious Sendai Myokai team is capable of doing. What a disappointment. Well, what did you expect from two brats and a girl? The two Geninsuna scoffed. Tsunade clenched her fists in anger. She hated being belittled for her. To be a kunoichi. Unfortunately, it was common for men to be better shinobi, an attitude she longed to change. Do you have any ideas, Orochimaru? He asked his teammate. Meanwhile, said Genin was developing a strategy by going over what his opponents they had demonstrated so far. Both ninjas made their home country proud with their prowess in the Jutsu Futon Wind, but one was also good at Genjutsu, allowing him to use it from a distance as support, while his partner attacked from medium to close range with Ninjutsu and Taijutsu. Ideally, If the Atsunade could take on the talented shinobi in Genjutsu at close range, they wouldn't be able to support their teammate. But unfortunately, the futon techniques affecting the area were good to keep. To people at a distance. Suddenly, a plan started to take, and Tsunade, I need you to disable the ninja who is throwing the support ninjutsu. Orochimaru said while gesturing to the Suna ninja furthest away from them, I'll give you a chance to get closer, just make sure you do it. Sounds good to me. I guess you'll take care of the other one, right? At this question, Orochimaru simply nodded and began to form them before shouting futon. Datopo wind release, breakthrough. The huge gust of wind that was unleashed was easily avoided as soon as Genin recognized the technique and moved just in time. However, it also kicked up quite a bit of dust, which provided Tsunade and Orochimaru with excellent cover to sneak up on their opponents, effectively isolating them. As is common among Genjutsu users, Taijutsu is usually their weak point, which was a pity for Suna's Genin who was facing Tsunade. Not only was she exceptionally talented at Taijutsu, but she was much stronger than she appeared. And he was systematically crushing it. In a fit of desperation, he tried to distance himself, to hide under a Genjutsu. Suddenly, Tsunade seemed to appear behind him and knocked him to the ground with a quick blow to the back of the head. When he tried to stand up, the Ninsuna found that his body didn't seem to want to respond the way he was telling it to. What the hell did you do to me? He asked Tsunade in a tone that was a combination of anger and fear. You have become the first great success of my first original technique, Ramsen Soul Chaotic Mental Collision. I turned my chakra into electricity and used it to disturb your nervous system. You won't be able to move properly for hours, Tsunade declared with barely disguised slight pride. Tsunade then moved to hold her fallen opponent, but as she pulled out the ninja wire to tie her arms and legs, soon as Genin decided to be a sore loser. Undo whatever it is you just did to me, you stupid flat-chested bitch. As soon as those words left his mouth, he felt an evil aura descend on him that made it difficult for him to breathe. He had never felt anything so terrifying in all his life. When he looked up to meet Tsunade's gaze, he thought that maybe he had made a mistake. Meanwhile, Orochimaru was about to liquidate his opponent when the bound figure of Suna's ninja, Tsunade, with whom he was fighting, flew through the air and landed at his feet. The ninja had two black eyes, a broken nose, and a lot of teeth missing. He must have said something that upset her, as that idiot Jiraiya usually does, Orochimaru mused to himself. The sight of his companion's defeated body made Suna's last ninja look away from Orochimaru for an instant, but that was all it took. He soon found himself bound by Orochimaru's arms, although the rest of his body was about 2.5 meters away. Looks like you're done too, Orochimaru. Tsunade's voice was heard behind him. Don't take it away so we can find Jiraiya and get moving. At this, a sinister smile formed on Orochimaru's face before he replied, not before he is taught a lesson. Suddenly, Orochimaru extended his head and neck towards his opponent and bit him between the neck and shoulder. The Suna ninja screamed in pain before falling like a puppet with the strings cut, succumbing to unconsciousness. What the hell was that? You just had to knock him out, a furious Tsunade asked. Not much, just a variant of Dokakiri poison mist technique that I've been working on for a while. Orochimaru stated as if he didn't give a damn. You poisoned him like a snake would, Jiraiya's voice was heard as he descended from the trees. That strange neck-stretching thing was just disgusting. Let's get moving, Orochimaru said before darting towards the treetops. His teammates took one last look at Orochimaru's poisoned opponent before following suit. Meanwhile, Naruto was making much more progress as he left the mountain range where he was. The end of the mountain range was in sight. A few more hours and I'd be on level, firm ground. Although getting out of this mountain range will end up taking a little longer than I had thought. I'm going to have to pick up the pace if I want to find them all and complete this exam, the blonde thought to himself. Stupid future memory of Jiraiya pushing me over the edge of a cliff, Naruto complained. Unfortunately, the rocks where Naruto had just landed were unstable and gave way at the same instant, revealing the hole they had been covering. As he was taken by surprise, Naruto couldn't help but fall. Fortunately, the fall was not so pronounced as to cause serious injuries or render him unconscious. It was just quite painful. Somehow, the hole he had fallen into was covered again with stones, leaving him trapped. Great, isn't it? What the hell am I supposed to do? Naruto said as he got up from the ground and noticed that he couldn't get out the same way he fell. Interestingly, there were torches in the cavern that came to life at that very moment. And while Naruto was looking around trying to figure out where they came from, he noticed what seemed to be the entrance of a cave. With nowhere else to go, he decided to see where the cave led. The entrance of the cave led to a straight path forward. As we passed through it, the light of the torches dimmed. They never turned off, but the intensity of the light reminded Naruto of the corridor he always traveled in his mental landscape. To reach the Kumi's cage. Approaching the end of the corridor, the lights continued to dim further, and before he was in darkness again. The ex-Hinchiriki could distinguish that he was about to enter another large cave. In doing so, he knew immediately that he was not alone, but also that whatever was there was not threatening. He had the feeling that he was being watched, or rather, evaluated. While he was wondering what could be alive down there, a voice said, "Welcome, the one who once contained the Kumi." Before Naruto could wonder how whatever it was that was in this cave knew, the torches lit up on their own again. And Naruto found himself looking at something that he thought was impossible to exist. Naruto found himself staring at a dragon. "Welcome, young man," said the dragon in a wise tone. "You will be our summoner."